Hello everybody, my name is Ron Hengelsen. I'm here to talk about natural agriculture, home gardening. I imagine that a lot of you already have your home garden started. You've been growing food perhaps for a while. Maybe some of you haven't started home gardening yet. Natural agriculture is an exciting way to grow food, and I'd like to talk and share with you what it's about. First of all, natural agriculture was developed in 1930s Japan by Mokichi Okada, a naturalist and also a spiritual leader. Okada was very concerned for the farmers who were suffering in Japan. There were a lot of crop shortages, a lot of crop losses, and Japan was suffering. He saw the farmers really having low outages on their outputs. What he did was he experimented extensively and grew food at his property, and he learned a lot from that experience. As I mentioned, he was a spiritual person, so he did have some divine experiences during the process, which kind of led him in the direction that ultimately became natural agriculture. I would like to share with you the basic principles of natural agriculture. Basically, it is using pure seed. So every year you're going to grow vegetables and you're going to collect the best seed from those vegetables. And with that seed, you would reintroduce it back to the same area you grew it in a continuous cropping format. And thus, that plant would regrow from seed, and you would collect that best seed again. Do this year after year in a continuous cropping fashion. Here's the distinction that Okada figured out. He figured out that the natural soil, which is not amended, it's not fertilized or anything, nothing's added to it, but just that natural soil has the ability to grow and sustain vegetables. It's strong, they've got deep root systems, and they're very tasty and healthy. They can withstand terrible weather conditions such as rains or droughts. What he was doing was not feeding soil, but rather he was ensuring that the soil would stay moist, and not too hot or cold, and not compacted. Those were his concerns. And the way he did that was he would lay mulch on top of the soil, and the mulch could be leaves and grasses, but never would mulch consist of things brought outside of the garden that would be considered unnatural, such as maybe manures or some sort of thing to fertilize the soil organically maybe. He would never do that. He relied on the pure soil as best as he could. He tried to mimic nature, as nature would do every season. Dump those leaves and grasses. They would land on the ground. If you go deeper in the forest and go deep into that forest and dig in, you will find that it gets darker and more rich as you go deeper. And that's nature's natural way to replenish itself, to hold the temperature at the right temperature and to retain the moisture and keep the soil from being compacted. Okada believed that the earth is basically a massive ball of fertilizer. It's not too much nitrogen, not too much potassium. It's just right for the plants. It's already balanced if it's in its natural state. One of the things that he found was that when fertilizing plants, he noted that the root systems were weaker on those plants. And that could be quite a drawback when you come into a drought situation. The plants cannot withstand that drought as easily. Or if you have a serious rain or wind condition, the plants could be knocked down. So those root systems need to be strong and healthy to have a vital plant. Another thing you might note with the natural agriculture garden is that the plants don't seem to be as tall, and yet they have an abundance of fruit. A fertilized plant might be very impressive and very tall, but the fruit may not be as abundant in those plants. So we find that with our established natural agriculture gardens and farms that they are shorter plants and the fruit are more abundant and tasty as well. Another very important thing in natural agriculture is the heart of the farmer, the heart of the grower. What is your attitude in the garden, in the farm? What are you thinking? You're going, oh no, I got to do this. Oh no, I got to do that. It may not be a good approach for a natural agriculture farm. Rather, you might want to walk around and go, oh, I see I got a challenge there. Okay. And because our heart is open, because we're grateful for what is happening in the garden, despite the challenges, but we have many successes going on as well. Oh, I'm so happy to see that you're doing well. You can talk to your plants, really have a good heart, good attitude in your garden. I'd like to talk a little bit more about seeds. And where do you get your seeds when you're starting a garden? Ideally, you're going to have other natural agriculture seeds in your garden to start out. If you can't get those, then you might get some heirloom seeds or locally produced seeds. That would be ideal. If you have to, you can get organic. Hopefully, they're local organic seeds. The reason I say local is because seeds have a memory. Seeds that are grown in a certain climate condition, remember that. And if you want to introduce that type of seed that's been grown in a colder climate to a hotter climate, you may experience some challenges with that seed in trying to get it to produce. And vice versa, hot to cold. So ideally, you want to get a seed that's more locally or more adapted to your personal climate. Another reason for doing this continuous cropping is the soil and the seed have a connection. They're both adapting to each other. As I mentioned, the soil has the perfect amount of fertilizer, natural fertilizer for the seed already. As you grow and you're mulching year after year and your plants are thriving, the microorganisms that are in the soil are continuing to prosper and get more and more amounts of microorganisms. These critters are synergistic for the health and vitality of your plants as well. So that's a very nice benefit. So we talked about the seed, we talked about the mulch, the soil. What are the benefits of natural agriculture? The really obvious benefits of practicing natural agriculture. Well, one is you don't have to put stuff into the soil. You don't need to be adding rock salt or trying to satisfy this condition because your soil is too acidic or things like that. You're not dealing with that stuff. You're not fertilizing, you're not feeding the soil. There tends to be less bug infestation. Another thing in natural agriculture is that there are no real pests. Those bugs that are coming in, eating our broccoli or cabbage, they're not really pests. What they are is they are the balancers in nature. These bugs are coming through because there's an imbalance in nature. Maybe it's down the block, maybe it's next door, maybe it's in your own garden, but something's happening. Oftentimes especially in the beginning stages, we allow the bug infestations to occur without much intervention. Sure, you might spray aphids off with a hose, try to save that plant, but supposing you've got several broccoli plants growing in a row, and this one on the far right is really infested, and this one off to the left is less so. And eventually the one on the right dies out. But somehow the one on the left managed to hang in there and do quite well, actually. That's a strong plant. That's a plant you want to get seed from. That's a plant that perhaps developed a natural resistance to the infestation that was occurring. Nature's already perfect. We find this out as we get more and more into our gardens, our natural agriculture gardens. Nature has that restorative balance. That's another thing about natural agriculture. It's not a method of growing food. Sure, we have guidelines and certain things that we won't introduce into a garden or certain things we won't do in our gardens. But it's not a method. It's not a set way of doing certain things. Rather, you'll find that from site to site, location to location, and farmer attitude and heart, whatever, everything's different. Everything shifts a little bit. So that's a distinction that's important in natural agriculture. But as I mentioned, once you establish the garden, it becomes very low maintenance. You don't have to do a whole lot. Oftentimes, people starting out will notice that, wow, these weeds are really tough to get out. You know, that first dig in, really tough. But we've loosened the soil up, we've got some stuff growing. Maybe you start out with the grasses. You decide, oh, I'm not going to grow any veggies yet. I want to just kind of get the grasses going. I need a lot of organic matter, you know, and the grasses are great for that. Or you can do clover or things like that, cover crops. And then at the end of the season, you would chop that down, put it back on top of the soil, or chop it up really fine and mix it in and reseed those grasses again. You could do that. What you will find, though, when you initially dig in, the weeds will pop up. They'll keep coming up, you know, and you get different kinds of weeds. As the soil condition changes, as it improves, you will find those weeds coming up are less obnoxious, less pernicious, more kind of like, wow, supportive. Well, I trust that offered a fair introduction to what natural agriculture is. I would like to stop the recording at this time and live in person open up for discussion, Q&A. So thank you very much for watching this recording.
We have a question in the chat. How do you handle neighbors using pesticides?
Yeah, that's a tough one. As I mentioned, you know, we received their impact. You know, they're using pesticides. Well, it does have an impact on us. So sometimes too, you know, you have a neighbor that's using some really noxious weed remover or something like that. Fortunately, a lot of people are gaining a greater wisdom on how that stuff is having a negative impact on their health, and they're using it less and less. So we can really just have a conversation with them about that as well. So, you know, what can you do other than that? Are there a lot of you growing gardens nowadays since the COVID's come around?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely growing a lot more vegetables at home.
That's great, great, yeah. I commend anybody who's growing anything these days, organic or otherwise. You know, if you can walk out your door and just grab that fruit, I mean, it's the best thing.
Ron, we have another question. Do you do any weeding when weeds come up naturally?
Yeah, it depends, Jeannie. Like when I'm starting a garden, we started quite a few gardens in Los Angeles several years ago. So we got a lot of background and experience based off of that. You know, some of those dig-ins are real tough. You start in a garden and this soil's heavy clay, something going on, right? It's hard to get in, but once you've got that soil loosened up and you started your seedlings and you're mulching and trying to keep it moist, weeds will still come up because usually there's not enough mulch. The weeds will come up, but you find that the next year weeds are different kinds of weeds. And the year following, they're different. The weeds seem to adapt as the soil conditions improve, the weeds change. So that's kind of exciting. And I'm a very big proponent for weeds. I cultivate weeds on the north side of my property where they're not going to blow into any neighbors. I mean, I got all kinds of stuff happening back there. It's exciting. And the beneficials are amazing. All these little critters are flying around in that north area, gathering pollen, getting food. You know, it's just an amazing environment. And I'm just fortunate to have this space where I live to be able to do that. So I love weeds. So weeds happen, just like worms.
So speaking of weeds and worms, what about snails? We have someone who's having a lot of problems with young sprouts and the snails are getting to them.
What are they growing specifically? Is it?
Let me see here.
It kind of depends. So,
It's just says the seeding phase. I know I'm having a horrible time with cabbage. I can't get cabbage to grow. The snails and the those white butterflies, the
yeah.
cabbage moths or
Hmm.
butterflies, whatever they're called, are getting to it too. So now we have everything covered.
It's good to know what your soil is like. It's good to know what you got growing around it. It's good to know uh, where the seed came from for the cabbage. Also, too, sometimes, those critters are going to disseminate your cabbage, the head. Um, and we don't like to see that, of course. What kind of intervention is natural agriculture? Well, if we have failure after failure growing a certain crop and the bugs are just too much, we might stop and stop doing that particular crop. Or we might do something different to keep the bugs at bay somehow. But that intervention is looked upon as something's not working in that environment. Something, if you've got that kind of infestation. I mean, I have handpicked the roly-poly bugs and taken them out because of the mulch. They like to eat that and they, get in there and then they get on the veggies. But then again, sometimes that's okay too. So I don't know, there's a lot of tolerance in our gardens, in natural agriculture gardens. But when we're feeding soil, I gotta say, that's creating a lot of issues for your gardens. When you are organically or you're doing certain things to enhance your gardens, coffee grounds, whatever you're doing to enhance that soil, it's perhaps not a good move, and it's attracting a lot of infestation. Sorry for the long answer, but there are so many variables in your garden. You really need to be in tune when you're stepping out there and looking at things and what's occurring. You really need to be in tune with where the balance is, what is nature trying to do here for you, because nature will adjust things for you without your intervention. So I don't know how else to go into this.
Is your garden on a watering system?
I do a combination. Since I'm home with COVID, I don't travel, week or monthly to different locations, so that's nice. I'm able to more closely monitor. So I do have a drip system, and I have a soaker hose, and they're timered, and they come on about 8 in the morning, and it works perfect. I go in this special loop with the soaker hose, and I'm growing stuff along that loop, and then the drip system is good for my certain rows that I have set up. And then I, supplement by hand watering, whether it's taking a hose without a nozzle on it and slowly placing it on each plant and letting it soak a little. I like deep soaks, but less frequent waterings when possible. That's ideal. You don't want to pamper your plants beyond the seedling stage. Once they've established their roots, gotten them stronger, in a natural agriculture garden, we tend to deprive them of water a little bit. You really want those root systems to go, and get deep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions about tilling or not tilling the soil, and also what about mulch?
Yeah. Individual farmers will choose to till or not till. Natural agriculture recognizes that tilling has an impact on the microbiology in the soil. A lot of critters are down there doing us a service as we grow our foods. And a lot of people prefer not to till. I'm one of those. Once I've dug in, I don't want to dig in again. I don't want to turn soil. So, did I answer everything on that?
Does anybody else want to jump
It's
on and
actually
ask a question?
individual choice to till or not till. Natural agriculture, if you do it right, in my mind, you're doing enough mulch, you don't need to till. You just, at the end of your growing season, you just reintroduce seedlings or start new seeds, direct seeding, pardon me.
Also, Ron, do you have any suggestions for critters like deer, squirrels, rabbits, things like that to keep them out? Are you mostly just
Yeah,
chicken wire, or what are you doing?
yeah. Masayo and I, for those of you who know us as a couple, we've got a project in southern Washington, and we've been working up there for years. Very kind lady, a friend of ours. And so we have a space set aside that we're growing on. And we had to put up a deer fence, and it was just plastic. And we found that, yeah, it kept the deer out, but then some voles or moles got in, and so they chewed through the plastic easy. So then we followed up with a thicker plastic that didn't cut it, and then finally with a metal fence on the lower half. But still, to do it right, we need to put metal down in the ground a foot or 18 inches deep to block the ground diggers and keep them from coming into that area. Yeah, nature really has its way. You know, the deer will jump the fence, which they did. Actually, they did once, and they ate up a lot of the stuff in there. So it's tough. So you really have to fence out these critters, keep them out. Sometimes you have raised beds, and you can use that material. Oh, it's called something material. It's metal mesh that you put at the bottom of your bed, a raised bed. It keeps out, you know, whatever, gophers, if that's your issue.
Thank you. And also with regard with what preparation needs doing before planting and what kind of plants will do best in soil. Also, you said to consider, you know, get to know your soil. So what points are important with that, and then getting things ready to be off and running?
Okay, let's talk about soil then. The soil is critical. I mentioned in the video that we feel that it already has all of the nutrients needed to grow our foods. So of course, you have to be selective on what you're growing. How much sun do you have? Is it enough sun to grow this tomato, pepper, whatever requires a lot of sun? You have to consider that on your site. But soil is key and tantamount. Those root systems need to be able to get into that soil. If it's just a heavy clay, or if it's just a sandy soil, that may not be an ideal situation to be growing food. You may need to do something to loosen up that clay or to get that sand to hold moisture better. So clay holds moisture great, but sand, it just goes right through, okay? So you may have those two types of soils, and you may want to remediate or take care of that situation. And mulch turning into compost. Compost could be mixed into that soil, okay? Compost consists of leaves and grasses. So starting your garden, the most important thing you can have on your property is an abundance of mulch or material set aside that is discarded. Maybe you cut your lawn, you haven't been fertilizing that lawn. Please hold those grass clippings. Please hold those tree branches. Hold anything that isn't treated on your property. Hold that. Put it in a pile, set it aside, maybe separate the grasses, the branches, you know, the bigger, the smaller stuff. Those grasses can become a compost for you. If you do it right, it'll be a slow composted action that you can later mix into your soil. So soil is so important when you start that garden. Of course, the dig in is tough. If you've got a very hard soil, you need to pre-soak and dig in, maybe pre-soak a little more. Get it down 12 inches at least. It depends on what you want to grow. Do you want to grow root vegetables? Well, you're going to want to mound your soil up higher so the roots can have that longer depth. It's kind of comical. When I first started natural agriculture about 23 years ago, I had a hillside and I really wanted to grow natural agriculture. So I just dug these little trenches and planted all the daikon seed. And sure enough, daikon was sprouting and I was really doing great. And I had a bunch of friends over and we needed some daikon. I said, yeah, I'll get it. I grabbed one out of the garden and it hit the hard pan in my garden. So it grew like this, an L shape. So it actually grew down to the hard part and then it just went L'd out. So it was kind of it's good to loosen your soil up and have it deep enough if you're growing root vegetables like daikon. I do grow daikon, and it does push through the clay in my soil somewhat. And I just keep that root there. I don't harvest it. And then I take the greens and grab the seed off of that and reuse those seeds. But that is a nice little conduit for water to get into that hard clay, which I have here.
Do you use compost from your kitchen, like, and compost that?
Yeah.
As you're talking about grasses and you're talking about branches, but do you also use your kitchen leftovers in your compost?
Yeah, gosh, I wish I could say yes, but we don't do that. Those items could be composted, perhaps on a different part of your property, but I would not mix those in with your natural agriculture project. Reason being is that the intent of natural agriculture is to allow nature to restore the balance with your subtle intervention, of course. When you are introducing organic, food scraps, those organic materials are residuals that would end up in your garden. We don't want to do that. We don't want to introduce foreign things that, aren't conducive for this natural balance to occur already.
So what happens in my garden? I do have a worm bin. It literally turns to earth. It looks like you would never know it was a carrot top. It is earth. It is dirt and earth. So you would not, because I add that to my garden. You think I should not add it to the garden?
Well, so, you probably have a beautiful, wonderful garden, and I admire that. Ultimately, my aim in my garden through natural agriculture is to have all this thriving plant life growing in a manner that it becomes so low maintenance in the future. I don't have to do much at all. That's the aim for me. Natural agriculture will afford you that ability to become a low maintenance, thriving garden. Really, the plants are strong, they're healthy, they're vibrant, they're full of life force, the food that tastes great. That's my aim. As I mentioned before, when we're feeding the garden, we're of the mind that something is lacking in the soil. And right there is a slight disconnect from the beauty and power of nature in itself to be able to restore things in a manner that may surprise us. I've been the organic trail, and I've worked with a lot of people on the organic gardens, and that is an important practice. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just a different emphasis, and for me, it's that type of emphasis. I'm working towards this thing to happen, and I believe natural agriculture is an avenue to achieve that maintenance-free, mostly, type of garden, but really naturally occurring garden.
And with naturally occurring garden, I mean, you mentioned that you do water your garden. Are you watering it just maybe twice a week, so it's just not terribly often?
Yeah. It depends, hot summer months, we got to water more often,
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just look at the plants. Plants will tell you when they need water. So, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I do try to get it down where the roots are. So it's not just that quick overhead spray water. That tends to compact the soil, by the way. But you can do that. It's okay to overhead spray. Just keep it light somewhat. But yeah, I like to get the water down to the roots. Is it okay? We'll take a quick break. I want to introduce a video. It's 4 minutes. It's all subtitled. The guy speaks Japanese, but he's working out of the UK, a place called Yatesbury Farm. And his name's Shinya. I just love his energy. He's been doing natural agriculture a long time. So it's just a 4-minute kind of intro to Shinya and his success in the UK with natural agriculture. Thank you, Jeannie.
ハロー、エブリワン、皆さん、こんにちは。僕は今橋と言います。自己紹介をさせてください。僕は、岡田牧知氏が提唱する自然農法を18年させていただいております。日本で3年間させていただきまして、イギリスで15年させていただいております。ここはウィリシャーっていうところにありまして、ここでは自然農法を11年させていただいております。40種類の野菜を作ってまして、トマトやこの、ニンニクや玉ねぎやポテトなどを作ってます。で今、85% の野菜の種取りに成功してまして、2年後には 100% になるように頑張ろうと思います。この補助では、毎年300人の人が来まして、自然農法に興味を持ってくださっております。で毎年オープンファームや、自然農法ラーニング、プログラムっていうのをさせていただいてまして、自然農法のことを教えさせていただいております。で昨年はですね、本当にありがたいことにBBC ラジオの方に出させていただきまして、全国ネットでここのことが紹介されまして、多くの方に来ていただきました。ありがとうございます。でこのチャンネルではですね、まず第一に、僕がどのように野菜を作っているのかを紹介させていただきます。で次に僕の自然農法に対しての考え方や自然農法のフィロソフィーをですね、紹介させていただこうと思います。で最後に、皆さんからのコメントやご質問にお答えさせていただこうと思いますので、コメントくださったら嬉しいです。でこのチャンネルを通して皆さんが自然農法のことをもっと身近に感じてくだされば本当に嬉しく思います。自然農法のことを簡単に説明させていただきます。自然農法は清らかな土、清らかな種、生産者の心から成り立ちます。清らかな土っていうのは無肥料無農薬の土です。で清らかな種っていうのは清らかな土から育てられた野菜から自家採取した種で、生産者の感謝の心というのは作物や土に対しての感謝の心です。で自然農法の根本理念は自然順応自然尊重です。自然から学び自然と調和すること、自然農法の根本にあるのはそんな人間の生き方です。皆さん、今日の動画はいかがでしたか？今日のまとめとして、自然農法の根本理念は自然順応自然尊重です。自然が全てを教えています。次の動画ではこちらのルッコラの種まきの仕方と、収穫の仕方を紹介させていただきます。ではご視聴ありがとうございました。Have a nice day! バイバイ。
Yeah. Senior is a good guy. I met him many, many years ago. So I'm glad to see he's very successful in the UK. He's been on that farm for a bit. So, anybody want to comment or share anything, what's happening in your world, gardening-wise?
We have a couple of questions here too. There was a question, what about using a worm farm to help loosen the soil?
Yeah, worms are great. Naturally, culturally, they do happen. Permaculture, when you're raising worms, there's a lot of benefits. You could put all your food scraps in there and then they take care of that. It's just wonderful. Again, though, I wouldn't be mixing the worms with natural agriculture. They will happen naturally in a natural agriculture garden. So I don't know if I answered the question. Probably not.
I think it's good. Next question. If you want to convert a lawn to garden, what is the best way to get rid of grass with minimal disruption?
Yeah, so I would scrape the surface, save that grass. Actually, get as much grass growth as you can beforehand, because that grass is just going to go right back into the soil that you just dug up. We got to get that soil loosened out. Of course, you're going to have grass clippings coming back. You're going to have a lot of new weeds that weren't there before coming up. You know, all these things. Oftentimes, you know, in that startup garden, those weeds are coming up. You just top them. Make sure the stuff you're growing is bigger than the weed next to it. And that's sufficient. Keep the root systems of those weeds in your garden. They're helping you out. You know, anything to loosen the soil. As much organic matter as you can get around to mulch around your plants and what you're growing. Mulch will repress the weeds if it's thick enough. So again, I don't mind weeds much at all.
So are you using any of your, you know, let's say the season's over and a plant is dead. Are you using the extra parts of that plant for your mulching too?
You bet. Yeah, that's natural agriculture.
Right. Okay.
Nothing
So
wrong
like,
with that.
so like if I have 100 onions because the Frenchman is making a giant onion fondue,
Yeah.
and I have 100 onion casing skins, would you put that into your compost too, or not really, because it's more the fruit of the plant?
Yeah, I'd rather do the green part of the plant, the roots, you know, the brown, not the fruit itself so much.
Okay.
Save that for the worms.
Okay. Because when we first moved to San Diego about a year ago, this yard is solid clay. So we actually ended up digging holes in the ground and putting in fresh, you know, the layerings of the dirt and the worm casings, all that kind of fun stuff. And that is going really well, but the clay is so solid that you have to be careful not to overwater.
Yeah.
Because that liquid's not going anywhere beyond that. So we're kind of learning, like you said, the environment of how to balance that out properly. It's been a learning experience, but a lot of the soil, instead of buying a ton of it, we have so much, you know, extra little clippings of veggies and stuff. Patrick started his own pile of what he calls the contribution to the worms in the neighborhood.
Right.
And he makes this really rich soil with that. He's been kind of starting plants off in that before he puts them in the beds. But I wanted to share with you, speaking of natural agriculture and the way that your garden will attune to you, a few weeks ago we were having a big bug problem. And I kept thinking in my morning meditation, I would love it if the universe would find a way to get these bugs under control. And within a few days, I had garden spiders, the really big ones, show up. So how do you guys feel about those? Because the first time I saw it, it was highly intimidating. I thought it was like a tarantula or something. It was so big. But I know that they only have the sting of a bee now. But still, we've got a few of them now that are kind of marking their territory out there, and they're pretty intimidating. So some of our neighbors want them to be destroyed. So I've been tempted to put up a sign that introduces who we now call Bob and Bobette to the garden out front, so that the neighborhood children won't, you know, bury it, so to speak. So do you have any suggestions with like garden spiders? Have you dealt with those at all? They're a little
Jeannie, just have a conversation with them. Say, hey guys, you know, really, I appreciate you. I know you have a purpose here on earth. Maybe you cut me a little slack and, you know, go up to this corner up here or something else.
Yeah, hide somewhere instead of right in the succulents in front of the house.
Right.
It looks
put
like
up
we have Halloween decorations up already.
Just put up no spider signs around where they're hanging out. I don't know.
Yeah, something.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Well, yeah. It's just funny.
Ron, where would you recommend getting seeds if somebody wanted to start a garden or they wanted to start a new vegetable that they hadn't grown before? Where would you recommend that we initially get seeds? And then once we have those seeds, obviously we can harvest them and replant them year in, year out, correct?
Yes, absolutely. You want to save your best plants and grab those seeds and you reuse those. Yes.
So where would you initially go?
Yeah, so where are you at, Saucy? Are you
I'm in San Rafael, California, Northern California.
in Rafael? Right. So we have we used to have a farm there in Santa Cruz. Yeah, I'd love to see you get natural agriculture seeds that are, because that would be great for you to get those Santa Cruz seeds, because those are.
What's the farm called?
It's no longer. Actually, we sold it a couple years ago, and it has since caught fire, which is so disheartening to see the environment and what's going on. All these fires. Again, we're just creating it, ourselves. But for me, what I did here out of Portland, Oregon, is I had to go to a trusted seed source, an organic supplier, and they're in New York State, which is a similar climate to what we are here. And we tried their seeds out. Really tough to get them to go. I'd rather be, in hindsight, I'd rather go around the neighborhood and find people who are growing stuff. Say, hey, can I get some of your seeds at the end of the season? And do it that way. I mean, really, if you can go to a seed company that you trust, fine, try that. But ideally, you're going to find someone local who's growing stuff already. Get some seeds from them. That's the best.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
I had a question about the seed saving. I mean, it's way beyond me because I haven't even had anything growing in my backyard for a long time. But the fellow in the video, the Japanese fellow,
Yeah.
he mentioned that he's been able to save more than 85% of his seeds successfully. And I was curious to know, because you talked about best seeds. Now, does that just mean in his case, like they're all that good? Because it would seem to me that 85% is like almost all of them, not really being very picky.
What Shinya was referring to was that he's growing 40 varieties of vegetables, and he was able to save seed from 85% of those varieties.
Oh, the different varieties. Okay.
Yeah, so some I guess he wasn't able to save seed from. Yeah. I don't know what he does in that case.
But I mean, of all the seeds that come off of the plant,
Yeah.
are you like looking at them to tell which ones look nice in order to decide what's the best ones?
Yeah, so if I'm growing, let's say, squash, kabocha squash, it's a Japanese squash. I'm sure most of you folks know what it is, being part of Vegetarian Education Institute and macrobiotics. Anyway, when I'm growing that squash, I'll pick the best looking squash and hold that, put a little ribbon on it. No, don't eat this one, And that becomes a future seed, And that's what Shinya was doing, is he's saving, the best seed he can find. He's not saving a complete row of a certain plant seed. He's just saving a couple plants on that row and getting seeds.
So you just throw the whole kabocha into the garden, and you don't eat the flesh.
Oh,
Is that what you're saying?
when I want to use that seed, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh, well, squash is a little different. What we like to do is let it really get brown on the vine and maybe even rot a little bit into the ground. And then we'll take it out, get the seed out of it, and at the right time for the next season, we will start seeding those seeds into the next garden. And it'll be the same bed.
So you do handle them. You do actually take them apart and spread them.
You betcha. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Got to save seed, folks, really. I mean, times are a little shaky out there in the world on seeds. So you can't cross borders with seeds. I mean, it's really bizarre, right? So you have to have a company and licensing and all that. Wow, you can't bring the fruits and veggies around. You can't really share seeds easily. So you got to get heirloom seeds. If you want to buy hybrid seeds, I think you're going to have difficulty sustaining your plant growth season after season. You're going to get some weird things happening. You won't have the consistent type of vegetation growing from hybrid seeds. But heirloom seeds are pretty cool. If you can find them, get them local. be careful about Messiah was giving me some nice notes here. Be careful about cross-pollination, because you grow certain varieties of plants and they will cross-pollinate. Squashes, different plants will, the bees will land on this one, and then 20 feet later you got this other type of squash growing and they land on that. Well, there you go, you cross-pollinate. So the seeds.
But is that really bad? I mean, you're just going to get something different from the original varieties,
yes,
aren't you?
Exactly, okay. You will. And it's happening in my daikon. So I'm not complaining. I'm just collecting all the seed and I just keep growing it year after year, and I get some of these round little things going on, and then I get the daikon stuff. So it's a mix. I like the diversity in nature. If I grow a lot of different stuff, it's great. It's wonderful that I have enough space to do that. Not all of us have the luxury of having a large area to grow on. Some of you are growing on, 10 by 10s, or 10 by 20s if you're, in better shape. So careful what you're growing in that space if you don't want to cross-pollinate. So,
what is the size area you guys are growing on right now?
My property is a little unusual. We're starting our 3rd year growing here in Portland. The backyard, which I'm looking at now, is terraced and it's very shady and some direct sun, but not enough to sustain veggies that well. So we opted instead to go to the humongous front yard. So our property is set back quite a bit. So we have a big front yard, and it's so weirdly laid out because I've got 3 very large Douglas firs here on the property that cast shade throughout the day on the property. But it's an odd shape, and it's the best I can do with the sun. I get for my tomatoes maybe 7 or 8 hours sun maximum. I'd love to get 10 hours or more. So yeah, it's an odd property set up here.
Hey, Ron, you talked about letting the squash rot a little bit before you removed the seeds from it.
Right.
Would you do that with all seeds or just certain kinds of vegetables?
Yeah, so we're trying to mimic nature a little bit here. What happens naturally is that the seed will drop to the ground, it'll decay or rot, or some seed is going to be viable out of that, and you'll have a new growth naturally occurring year after year, and then the seed drops. So we're trying to mimic that a little bit. We could do it with other seeds. Squashes are really good. Cucumbers, as long as you're not rotting the seed itself, then it's kind of cool to do it this way. But you really want to have those large fruits. That biggest kabocha, that biggest watermelon, that biggest cucumber. It's so big it turned yellow on you. That's great. Save that and let that get on the ground and rot. A little, not completely.
A couple of weeks ago, I saw a squirrel climbing up my 10-foot plus sunflower, and I chased it down, and about maybe 5 minutes later, it was running back up to the sunflower. I chased it, and the next morning I woke up and the head of the sunflower had been decapitated. But again, of course, I was annoyed at that because my beautiful sunflower was disappeared. But again, the seeds, I'm going to have new sunflowers next year in that spot, right? That squirrel probably didn't eat all the sunflower seeds. Some will have landed in the ground, I'm hoping. So.
How exciting. Wonderful story. I love squirrels. They're just,
they're not my friend. I'm not a big fan of them.
I know. They do tend to eat a lot of our stuff and mess things up. And
they're just rats with shaggy, brush tails, in my opinion. So not a fan of them.
No. Sometimes me neither,
Yeah.
So, boy, that's funny. I tried to plant my sunflowers, but the squirrels got the seeds. They just stole them. So
yeah.
I only got one sunflower in the backyard here. So that's another thing too. If in your gardens, we really want to be kind to some of the animals, not the squirrels, of course, but to the birds and the bees, the hummingbirds. If you could, plant those beneficial, attracting, flowers type plants in your garden, that's great. I have a lot of clover growing around the property, and the bees just love it. And not just bees, but other little flying insects get a kick out of that. There's so many different types of flowers growing here. The hummingbirds are coming around this year. I set up a little bird bath and was surprised to see birds using that. It's wonderful. So maybe you don't want to attract birds because they're going to peck at your fruit or veggies. And, there's things you want to do to limit the bird activity in that case. But, let's take care of our friends out there too.
Does anyone have any more questions or anything they want to pop into the chat for me to ask Ron for you? You can always unmute yourself or *6 to unmute yourself to ask Ron directly.
And one more thing I just want to add. This farm garden area we're working on in southern Washington, it's a really very sandy soil, sandy loam, and it's hard to hold the water in that. And somebody asked a question about they're next to the woods. Well, there is a woods next to this garden, and we're not opposed to going into that woods environment, digging under a tree, and getting down to the real dark brown, black soil, humus type mix there, and pulling that in a bucket and bringing that over to the garden. We're not feeding soil. We're simply changing the condition of that soil so that it can better hold moisture. One more thing, if Masayo can hand me that, is if you want to look into getting natural agriculture foods, you can go to Wholesome Essence. Unfortunately, it's not focusing.
I did put the website information in the beginning of the chat, so it's on there with also Shumei America's website and your email address, I believe, that you provided us with if anyone wants to get a hold of Ron directly.
So natural agriculture is really an approach. It's not a method. It's a way to embrace what nature offers us already, and to trust that, to respect it, to respond to it when necessary, always allowing some things to occur. It's kind of a life changer for me in that it's opened me up to be more intuitive with nature. And our founder, Mokichi Okada, who introduced natural agriculture in the 30s, he said that nature can teach us everything. And I believe that. If you look at all of nature, not just the garden, but all of nature can teach us everything we need to know in life. And so we can be grateful for that, and learn from that. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Any last parting shots here?
Thanks so much. That was really interesting.
Thank you. So we're always happy to grow food. So let's keep doing that. Keep that connection with nature. It's so important. A lot of people are missing that these days. And if you could share it with others, invite them into your garden, whatever, help them out. That's awesome. Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Ron. We have one last comment. My soil in San Diego is extremely sandy and poor. Following the natural agriculture method, would I not add amendment?
Yeah, so by amendments, you're trying to introduce a organic matter, let's say, that came from a bag or came from okay, here's a possibility. If you're in such a dire situation and you have a big area that is sandy, then you might want to introduce some organic matter, which can be some mulch, a fine mulch from a trusted rock supplier type company, mulch supplier, and they can bring it out in a truckload, dump it on your property, and you can put that in there, and chances are you've remediated a situation which is heavy sand, and in a few years your garden would be up and kicking and doing pretty well. And maybe you had some adjustments because it wasn't quite natural, but you've had some adjustments. Hey, you can do that, folks, and start your garden and get it naturally going that way. Or ideally, too, you might go across the street to a neighbor and grab their grass clippings and their tree droppings. I don't know your situation, what's around you, but you got to get that organic matter into a sandy soil, and that will remediate that situation.
Thank you, Ron. One last question. People with compost piles and gardens having issues with ants, any suggestions on that when the ants are running amok and literally eating the plants as well?
Wow, yeah. I'm starting to get ants too, because I made pathways around, the backyard, and I brought in these wood chippings, and it attracted the ants. We do garden in Hollywood. It's a 2/3 acre garden, and there's a lot of ants around that garden, but they don't seem to be an issue. Sometimes we'll get into an anthill situation, but I don't know. Things have settled down since, the beginnings of that gardening process. I don't know. Maybe you have to give it time. Maybe you have to offer some other things for the ants to be able to eat and to be attracted to away from your growing operation.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ron. You have a lot of thank yous, very inspiring, much appreciated.
Thank you.
Lots of little comments in the chat from everybody to you, and thank you. We look forward to your wife, Masayo's class tomorrow. I believe is the Japanese tea ceremony around the same time. Thank you very much. Yes, exactly.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a good evening.
Yeah, keep them green.